Hello there, and a Happy New Year.
Hello. Well, this is a fascinating thing called a spirograph. It's a marvellous way of making different patterns, and if you were ill in bed, it would be a jolly good way of passing the time. I've been spending hours doing it, actually.
Well, in actual fact, when you're in bed, you don't want to read all the time, do you? So later on, you're going to show them some new ideas of things to do.
Well, as you probably know, this year is the 900th anniversary of a very famous building. It's Westminster Abbey. And as part of the celebrations, it's going to be floodlit like this every night for the whole year.
Well, Westminster Abbey certainly is a very fascinating place to go and look at. All the monarchs have been crowned there since it was founded on December the 28th, 1065. People like, William the Conqueror, Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth I, as well as Queen Elizabeth II. So you can see that the place has seen a lot of history made there. And another thing that they've done for this particular commemorative year is they've struck 3 medals. One in gold, one in silver, and one in bronze. And there it is. And very beautiful. This particular one's the gold one, and you can see the tails, they're all the same design in fact, which has got the view from the western end and shows the 2 famous towers.
Well, on the head side, there's not 1, but 10 heads, and they're all people who during the last 900 years have made a special contribution towards the Abbey. And the man in the middle is Edward the Confessor, king who rebuilt and endowed the Abbey in 1065.
Well, I think this would make wonderful souvenirs, don't you?
And
would, you know, the other thing is that the gold one, which costs £100, is sold out already.
Well, the silver one costs £5 and the bronze one costs £2.10. There might still be some left, and they certainly would make very valuable pieces, I think, in a few years' time as collector's pieces.
Yes, they would indeed. Well, now for something quite different. When 25-year-old John Riding tried to enter for the transatlantic yacht race, they took one look at his boat and fell about laughing. It was a 12-foot sloop, and here she is. Now, she was specially designed by John for this particular race, and he called her Sea Egg because of the rather strange shape. But with the hatches battened down, she'd bob along just like a ping-pong ball and get right over all the biggest waves. You know how a ping-pong ball just bobs along in a pond. Well, they said he'd never make it. The boat was so small she couldn't carry enough provisions for the journey, let alone take the battering of the North Atlantic. But John Riding was not the sort of man to take no for an answer. At Torquay Harbour, he loaded on all the provisions, got ready to set sail. Destination, the United States of America. He ignored all the warnings, and as the minute boat headed for the 2,000 miles wide Atlantic Ocean, few people thought that they would ever see him again. But, as you know, they did see him again, because 67 days later he made landfall in Bermuda and became the man to sail the smallest boat ever across the Atlantic. Well, do you remember in Blue Peter at the time, we did tell you the story, but we couldn't show you Sea Egg because she was in New York with John, but we showed you a boat of the same size to give you an idea of what he had to put up with. Well, today, in the studio, we have this fantastic boat, Sea Egg, that made this terrific crossing across the Atlantic, and with us here is John Riding himself. Hello, John.
Hello.
Well, why did you choose this rather strange, bold design?
Well, this was to get as much volume as possible into the 12-foot length.
Well, let's have a closer look at her. From the bow end, there you are, you can see it, curved over the top of the cabin. That's the porthole to the cabin, is it, John?
Yes, that's correct.
And what about this hatch here with the light on top?
This opens this way.
Yes.
And the door opens towards me.
So that
this
you
is for
can...
easy access into the cabin.
Yes, I see. Well, now, you're pretty big, aren't you? 6'4". How on earth did you manage to sleep in there?
Well, she's got a 6'6" height.
Right up into the bow, is it?
She extends from the bow right into the cabin here.
And you did all your cooking and eating and everything in there, did you?
Yes.
What sort of
I've got a little butane stove, and that is very low down, so it didn't swing about, and do all the cooking in the cabin on that.
How did you get on for food and water?
Oh, I had a basic diet of dehydrated meat, and this was reconstituted with water, and the water, 20 gallons.
I hear you had a bit of trouble with some ginger beer.
Yes. This was a bottle bought by mistake.
Yes.
And the top exploded, and the top flew off, grazed me across here.
Didn't do any real damage?
No.
That was jolly lucky.
I was lucky.
But did you have any sort of dangerous moments? Did you take any weapons with you to protect yourself?
Oh, I have here .32 automatic.
Oh, yes.
Which was to dissuade the larger mammals from coming too close.
And did you in fact use it?
I did in fact use it, not directly at anything, but
just to
ahead
make
of them
noise,
to scare them off.
Oh,
and
I
of
see.
Course, harpoon I picked up in the Azores.
It looks a vicious weapon, doesn't it?
I use that for...
Flicks over.
Yes, it never come out.
Yeah.
Very vicious. I used it on a few tuna.
When they came alongside you, did they?
Yes.
But tell me, did you have to rely on catching fish like this
No.
to add to your food supply?
No, this was because I was deficient in vitamins.
Yes.
And the fish has all of them.
Yes. What about water? How did you get on for that?
Well, I said before 20 gallons,
Yes.
but I did, in actual fact, run short. I was down to 3 gallons and caught 6 in a very high rain score.
That was lucky, wasn't it?
I was lucky, yes.
What is this piece of equipment here, which...
Well, this is about 60% efficient. It's an automatic steering vane. Of course, the rudder isn't here. There's a similar cog.
Attaches onto
and
that.
we set it into the wind. If she goes off course,
yes,
the wind comes on one side and turns it.
Oh, I see. So that means that you can sail on while you're sleeping,
yes, exactly,
and keep a fairly steady
course. It was
course.
most important to be able to do that. Yes.
Did you have much trouble finding your course across the Atlantic?
No. I used the normal navigation instruments and methods.
But you didn't carry a radio or anything, did you?
No.
What were the largest fish that you actually saw, or mammals?
Well, whales, of course.
And did they come very close?
Yes. Yes.
Well, I don't know whether you know the size of a whale, but if we had one in the studio, it would stretch from me here down to you down there, and I think that's me up here. I think you'll find that must be pretty frightening. Well, I believe that this boat will now, Sea Egg, will be on show at the boat show.
That is correct. That's what she's been brought over for.
Good. Well, there you are. If you want to go and have a look at her for yourself, now's your chance. Well, John, thank you very much indeed for coming along. Good luck in the future.
My pleasure.
Well, on Thursday, we began our new serial story, Black Beauty, probably the most famous story of a horse that's ever been written. Well, Black Beauty had a happy time as a foal, being brought up with his mother, a gentle horse called Duchess. But when he was 4 years old, he was taken to live at Squire Gordon's house at Birtwick Park. Well, there were other horses living in the squire's table, a little fat grey pony called Merrylegs, and a tall chestnut mare whose name was Ginger.
Black Beauty learnt, after a few days at Birtwick Park, that the mare Ginger's suspicious look and sometimes bad-tempered behaviour were because she had been cruelly treated when she was young. Ginger's breaking in had been a time of misery. Several men had cornered her, one had caught her by the forelock and another by the nose, while yet a third wrenched her mouth open and by force got on the halter and put the bit in her mouth. While one man dragged her round the field, another flogged her from behind. Then she was sold to a kindly old man who could have won her over. But unfortunately, he allowed his son, Samson, to do all the hard work. Samson was a bully. To him, the high-spirited mare was just a piece of horseflesh. One day, after weeks of his hard-heartedness, Ginger decided to get her own back. Samson had been pulling on the new bit, and Ginger's mouth was very painful. Suddenly, she reared up, and Samson began to flog her. Ginger fought hard. She kicked and reared, but Samson, digging sharp spurs into her side and punishing her with a whip, stuck to his saddle. With a final, terrible struggle, Ginger threw him and galloped off to the other end of the field. There, all through the hot day, with flies settling on her bleeding sides, she was left, without food or water. At last, her old master, Samson's father, came to her with kind words and a sieve full of oats, just as the sun went down. As she ate, he murmured, "Poor lassie, that was a bad business, a very bad business." And he led her back to the stable. Waiting at the door was Samson. Ginger laid back her ears and snapped at him. "She's vicious," said Samson. But his father was angry and told his son that a bad-tempered man would never make a good-tempered horse. Inside the stable, the old man himself sponged Ginger's bleeding sides, soothing her with gentle words, which gradually calmed her. Samson never went near her again. And very soon, Ginger was sold to a new master. Her second place was with a fashionable London gentleman, who drove her with another chestnut horse. Her master and his coachman only thought about the appearance of the carriage and horses, and reined them in so tightly that they could hardly move their heads. This made Ginger more irritable than ever, and even in her stable she snapped and kicked at the groom, who was no kinder than the master. One day, Ginger had been buckled into the carriage. Suddenly she plunged and kicked, and breaking a lot of harness, got herself clear. She had to be sold. And as she stood in the market amongst all the other horses, her fine appearance attracted one buyer in spite of her bad reputation. It was Squire Gordon of Birtwick Hall. The squire's groom, John Manley, had led Ginger back to Birtwick not long before Black Beauty himself. And with careful handling from John and James, the stable lad, she grew daily more gentle and lost her watchful and defiant look. Black Beauty's other stable companion, the little pony Merrylegs, had had a very different life, happy and secure. And yet he too could show his independence. One day, the squire's young daughters, Jessie and Flora, had the vicarage family of boys and girls to play. They went to the orchard, and the children rode Merrylegs round and round for nearly 2 hours, Merrylegs going as smoothly as he always did, with the little girls on his back. But when it came to the boys' turn, they cut great hazel twigs to make the pony go faster. Merrylegs felt he'd had enough, so he just stopped. They didn't take the hint, so he gently reared up on his hind legs and let his rider slip off backwards. Merrylegs treated all the boys the same, until they'd learnt that a pony is not a steam engine and can get tired, just like anyone else. When James, the stable lad, saw the big sticks, he was very angry. He took them away and told the boys that they were lucky that Merrylegs was such a good-tempered and trustworthy pony, or they might have been covered with bruises instead of only with grass. Black Beauty was very happy at Birtwick, and his greatest pleasure was to carry the squire. One day, Squire Gordon was coming home on Black Beauty when they met the builder, Sawyer, driving a beautiful bay pony towards them. The little pony turned in at the park gates. Without warning, Sawyer wrenched the reins round with such force that he nearly threw the pony down, and then started to whip him cruelly. The squire rode Black Beauty alongside. "Sawyer," he cried in a stern voice, "is that pony made of flesh and blood?" "Flesh and blood and temper," the man replied. "He'd no business to make that turn." The squire reminded the builder that as he'd often been up to the big house, the pony was only showing his good memory and intelligence, and should never have to suffer such brutal treatment. As Sawyer drove away, he felt that he wouldn't be getting any more work from Squire Gordon. And as Black Beauty trotted up the drive, he felt glad and proud that his master was the squire.
Well, in those days it was pretty unusual for horses to have kind owners like Squire Gordon, but we'll find out some more of what happens to Black Beauty in the next programme. Well, do you remember just before Christmas, Chris had the most terrible cold and very nearly lost his voice? Well, he was just able to carry on doing the programmes, but in fact, very often when you feel like that, the best thing to do is just go to bed for a few days. And of course, if you have mumps or measles or flu or something like that, you just have to go to bed. There's no option. And if you get pretty bored just sitting in bed doing nothing, I've got 1 or 2 ideas for you. First of all, these little potato men. And you can see that you can move their arms around if you want to. And the nice thing about making these, of course, is that there's absolutely no mess attached to them. What you need is 2 potatoes and cut off 1 like that so that it sits on the table. I've just moved this slightly out of the way. Now you need one of these cocktail sticks is a pretty good idea. Push that well into one side like that and push it down into the body there so that you've got the head and the body. Then you can make up all the bits and pieces either out of an old date box or cardboard, or I've used a piece of polystyrene, this sort of ceiling roofs. You've got to be fairly careful pushing these in because the ends are quite sharp. There's one eye, and of course you can paint on the features with one of these felt pens. And a little nose. Again, I'm pushing them in with one of these cocktail sticks. And a mouth. there. And arms here on the side, put them in that way. And of course you see you can move them, which is rather nice about putting them in on the sticks like that, rather than just gluing them. And the other side. The feet, I've painted 2 pieces black to look like boots. Push those straight in there. And there he's got little feet. And you could give him all sorts of odd things like a bow tie, perhaps. And from one of the old egg carton boxes, I've made one of those little hats. Sits on there. Well, you could probably think of all sorts of things, perhaps pipes or spectacles or trousers, sorts of odd little things. You could probably make lots of different figures, maybe a whole family. Well, that's one idea. Another idea has been sent in by George Miles, who comes from Ayr in Scotland. And his idea is this. I had all my pieces together. You need 3 pieces of cardboard, all the same size. One piece there is the base. Then the piece in the middle, you cut like that. So you cut a piece out here so you can move it. And turn it the right way around so they're both the same colour. And just cut round that one slightly. And paint on the middle 2 eyes. We'll see why in a moment. That goes onto there. And another piece goes on top of that, in which you cut 2 holes for the eyes like that. There, so that you can move them around. And then when you've done that, you then paint a face. In fact, George has made a rather splendid one here, and you can wiggle the eyes around. This would be great fun for amusing a young brother or sister, probably. Well, another idea, again something quite different, is a game called Bonkers. And it does drive you a bit bonkers, actually. The thing is, you've got lots of different blocks of wood like that. This is supposed to be a space. And you've got to get this piece of wood from A to B. Then you start again and you get it from A to C. Then you start again and you get it from A to D, which is the hardest of all, simply by moving. Well, that doesn't get me anywhere. Moving all these different bits of wood like this. And you can go on for hours and hours and hours fiddling with this. And it's great fun, but it does, like the name it's called, drive you a bit bonkers. Now we come back to the thing we started the programme with, which is the spirograph. And you get a very splendid kit like this, with rings here, different coloured pens, and lots of cogwheels with different holes in them. Lots of pieces of paper, and some little pins to hold the rings down, like that. And the thing is that, if I show you on this ring, they've got sort of little teeth, like a comb. And the idea is to keep the teeth of the ring together with the teeth of the cogwheel in the middle. And using any hole you like, you simply do this until you get marvellous... Whoops, I slipped there, you see, and that makes it go wrong. You get marvellous patterns. And when you get very clever, of course, you can also do the same thing on the outside. Go on for hours doing this with all sorts of different colours, and it's great fun because you never seem to come to an end of making patterns. And when you get very, very clever at doing it, you can make patterns like this. There you see is the inside, there's the outside. And there's a slightly different one. See how it varies, this time with a long thing instead of a ring. Well, of course, the simplest thing of all that you can do is simply to put old Christmas cards into a scrapbook and make those up, because they're very easy to make and they're always very welcome and well received by old people's homes and hospitals. Well, now, we said in the last programme that we're going to have something called Pinkerton's Assorted Colours in the studio today, and if you're wondering who or what on earth they are, then now's your chance to find out.
Well done, Pinkerton's Assorted Colours. That was, in fact, their first record and first time on television.
Lovely
Jolly
song,
good.
too.
Very nice.
Well, we heard a very unusual story the other day. It's all about Holly, a tortoiseshell kitten, who nobody seems to want. Well, just before Christmas, Holly was posted through a 12 by 4-inch letterbox at the office of the National Canine Defence League because her owners could no longer look after her. Tied round her neck was a card saying, "Please find this kitten a home for Christmas," and stuck on the other side was a 10-shilling note.
Well, things seem to have worked out pretty well for Holly because the other day a chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce arrived and to take her away. And soon she was snuggled up behind the shoulder of the chauffeur, Mr. Bert Weller, speeding on her way in the lap of luxury towards Amersham to the home of Mr. and Mrs. Kirby. There they are. And they've adopted her, and she certainly won't be lonely there because they've got 3 dogs, 3 cats, a budgerigar and a mynah bird.
Well, that story had a very happy ending, but you know, this Christmas 255 pets were found abandoned, and that was because people had given them to people as presents, and they just didn't know what to do with them, and after the festivities they were just put out on the streets and left.
I think it's absolutely dreadful that. The answer is, if you're going to give somebody a pet, do make sure that they can have it before you give it.
Well, another animal with a problem is this one. He's Shep, and he's a Pyrenean mountain dog.
Well, the trouble here was that he started off as a tiny little puppy, about a few inches long, and then he started to grow and grow and grow and grow. And he now stands 3 feet high, weighs 12 stone, and eats 2 pounds of meat a day. So you can understand a dog that size is very difficult to get into an ordinary house. So unless they can find a new home for him, I'm afraid he'll have to be destroyed.
Well, I hope someone will have Shep, because although he's enormous, he's a super dog.
Isn't he lovely? I think we'll be able to find a home for him somehow. Let's try. Anyway, on Thursday, we'll be showing you that special machine which we use to put the special sound effects onto our Blue Peter film.
I'll be showing you how you can make a woolly hat that's nice and warm in the winter, and, of course, another story about Black Beauty. So we'll see you then.
See you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.